All right, ChroNoSo listeners, we are here at the end of the journey of ChroNoSo, heading towards the ultimate challenge at WrestleMania 6. But we are at the end of this episode, and we are at the end, as a whole, WrestleMania 6 build. I'm here with my good friend from Down Under, David Hall. Dave, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing good, Ryan. I'm doing good. We're back 1 year. One wrestling year on. We looked last year at Hogan Savage build, and this year we get to do a bit of a recap on the build of the Ultimate Challenge. I think it should be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Last year, we had a lot of meat on the bones with the Mega Powers exploding. And this one with the Ultimate Challenge, we have a titled build, which I liked for this era. The Mega Powers explode, and now we have the Ultimate Challenge. And of course, we don't have as much meat to chew on, but I think we have enough to kind of sink our teeth into and take a trip down memory lane leading into this mega match at WrestleMania 6. However, Dave, I always want to kind of let you know what we got going on here. We have 10 weeks of Superstars builds to kind of discuss, and we have, of course, the Royal Rumble or the main event to kind of touch upon as well. So, historically, how do you feel about this feud heading into WrestleMania 6?
Look, I remember back in the day, it felt huge. It felt just so big. Warrior had been built so well at the back end of '89 that the build to the Ultimate Challenge just felt massive. And I think having done this ChroNoSo journey, I think it's been good to see that it was well built. It was well put together, that they really put the Warrior over as like almost on par with Hogan. It really, really felt that they were quite even in their perspectives. Whereas what we've seen previously is even with the Mega Powers exploding, there was always a feeling that Hogan slightly overshadowed Macho, which in the presentation. So this was a different presentation.
Yeah, it's curious too, and of course we know what happens at WrestleMania 6. And looking at those building blocks leading into this match is an interesting twist to put on the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan headed in. How do you feel both these guys look heading into this big match? Hulk first.
Look, it's interesting because. And we'll touch on a little bit more detail, but Hogan came into this obviously as the top guy. He'd really reestablished himself as the number one guy in the company. Not that he'd ever really lost it, but having regained the title and dispatched of Warrior and dispatched of Savage, dealt with DiBiase sort of. He dealt with Zeus. Like he really was in this untouchable position, and yet, as we start to see some of the promos, and we'll talk about this later on, Hogan actually comes across as, I feel he comes across as sort of a guy at a crossroads. Is he the number one guy anymore? Even in his own eyes, he starts to question, am I the number one guy still? And it's an interesting presentation. Very different. Hogan was always, I'm the guy, I'm the best. Look at me, I'm going to win and I'm going to do this, and all the Hulkamaniacs with me. And even very early on in this story, Hogan's questioning himself a little bit. Now, obviously, later on, he turns it around, but it's a unique thing. Hogan almost comes across as a guy with vulnerabilities, which you don't normally see.
Yeah. Curious why they presented that. Perhaps it was a red herring. Perhaps it was like psychology-wise is, all right, I know I'm losing, and I'm going to have like this realization of why I lost. So I want to present why I lost before the match in a way too early on in this feud, because he's doubting himself for the first time in a long time, if ever, in front of these WWF fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that if in a proper sports context, you talk about the mindset going into a sports event. And obviously, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the NFL playoffs and building to the Super Bowl. And, teams always talk about needing to take the field with their mind right. They need to be focused. They need to, be truly switched on. And you get that impression that Hogan may have almost out-psyched himself a little bit. But at the same time, it also helps elevate the Warrior, because if Hogan's doubting, can he beat this guy, it puts the Warrior in the position of he's being seen as an equal to Hogan by Hogan himself. And I think that's what helps this story a little bit, is Hogan sees Warrior as his equal, not just as another guy.
And that's curious that coming out of it, because the Warrior's tone never changes, right? So I'm curious if the Warrior showed a little bit more vulnerability like Hogan, with him triumphantly winning at WrestleMania 6, if the Hulkamaniacs would have felt that like journey with him, because as we'll talk about, the Warrior feels overly confident the whole time heading in.
Oh, he's massively, never a doubt in his mind. He was always of the belief that he is going to win, that he is going to overcome, that he was going to, and not just vanquish Hogan, but really, pummel him into submission. Like it really comes across as super confident in a way that you don't normally see the good guy presented in WWF at that time. Like the good guy was always presented as they're vulnerable. Can they overcome the odds?
Yeah.
And Warrior was like, I've got this.
Yeah, which is a unique confidence, but I don't know. It's interesting. It was a risk. I like it, right? But all right, this would start all the way January 7th. They would announce just the Sky Dome would hold the place of WrestleMania 6, and it was kind of the kickoff to this Ultimate Challenge. They didn't really announce the Ultimate Challenge, but they announced WrestleMania 6 as the last Superstars in January. So we're off. But that led us into the Royal Rumble as well. What did you think?
Just on that, in the last Superstars, an interesting thing to note, we haven't even had the Royal Rumble yet. Hogan's on the Brother Love show, and Hogan actually starts talking about how there's one guy that he needs to survive. There's one guy that he wants to meet one-on-one, and that's the Warrior. So he even lays the foundation before we get to the Rumble of Hogan going, the Warrior's the pinnacle here. I want him one-on-one. He's talking about the Rumble match, but I think it lays the foundation for the rest of the story.
Yeah, and what did you think about that spot in the Royal Rumble where because it's very memorable, where it's very magnetic, right? Those two just staring off, and the Warrior kind of frantically, like a young deer, right? Just kind of sees the headlights and maybe kind of dissipates away from Hulk, or lets Hulk outsmart him. What did you think of the Rumble overall leading into this Ultimate Challenge?
Look, like you said, it's an iconic spot, and I mean Jesse's commentary just made it even better with the look at this, the two guys just confronting each other. It's so different to what we see in Rumbles today, because these days the two guys would just go hammer and tong at it, whereas we sort of had the two shoulder blocks that don't move each other, and then they do the crisscross and clothesline each other, and it's done. That's it. That's all it was. So with a modern day lens, it can actually feel a little disappointing. You're like, why didn't they do more? But in the moment, at the time, it was just, you didn't get that. And just the face-off, the one-on-one face-off, and the fact that it was all even, that the two shoulder blocks and the clothesline, like they were dead even in power and strength and everything.
Yeah, it was a good way from a physicality standpoint, to set the table, right? Because they would go to that power versus power spot a few times in the WrestleMania 6 match. So it was good that they laid that out from a physical standpoint right away.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Rumble's iconic, and it really did its job of setting the tone here. And then Hogan on the second Superstars here on the February 3rd edition pretty much just offers his title to be the title for the Ultimate Challenge to be on the line here. And then pretty much I have the Hulkamaniacs, you got the Warriors, and our forces will kind of carry us victorious at WrestleMania.
Yeah, and the big thing he says is I need to find out what's the strongest force. Like he just lays it out from the beginning, and that's where I feel the initial doubt lays in. It's not I'm confident I'm the strongest force, but we need to find out what's stronger, Warrior or Hogan. I think it's a good basis. He's laying this. Let's make this match and see who's the best.
Yep. So they throw the challenges out there, and then the next week on Superstars, Jack Tunney pretty much would say, it's official. The Ultimate Challenge is the main event at WrestleMania 6, but I have yet to determine which title will be on the line. And then they just kind of more focus on the Hulkamaniacs having Hulk's back and the Warriors having the Warriors.
That's pretty. Yeah, it is very much there. Again, who's going to come out on top? Hogan's like, we'll find out who the strongest force is. It's almost like I can't wait to get there. And Warrior, it's he really puts it out there that I've got it. This is what we wanted.
Yeah, on 217, they kind of vulge away from the Ultimate Challenge just a little bit and insert the Macho Man and Mike Tyson, and they have brief comments about that because that would be a pivotal part aftermath wise, because at the main event, Warrior faced Dino Bravo, and Hogan had a WrestleMania 5 rematch with Iron Mike Tyson, but advertised Iron Mike Tyson, and Buster Douglas would be the special referee there. So they pretty much just kind of said, yes, we have the WrestleMania match, but we're going to take a pit stop here in Detroit, Michigan. What do you think?
It's interesting to note, though, that Hogan, this is the first time Hogan sort of encourages Jack Tunney to make it for the world title.
Yep.
But he actually says, this is the first time he actually says after WrestleMania, the Warrior is going to be the number one Hulkamaniac. Hogan, that's sort of Hogan's point. And Warrior stuff talks about things, I'm the one, I'm the top dog, I'm the one. But there's an interesting comment here, which we'll come back to later on. But he says that this Warrior, I am the slime that crept out from under the carpet, and I'm going to bring you the ultimate reality. And I thought, what the hell? And we know Warrior's crazy and out there with his comments, but that's the sort of comment I'd expect from a heel, identifying with being the slime and the nastiness and the horror. And Warrior starts talking about bringing Hogan into the darkness. And it's a very different take for a good guy to be talking about being slime and being in the dark. And it's a contrast here that felt a little weird, because Warrior's a good guy. Why would he want to be in the darkness and be identified with slime? So, but just a minor sort of thing that he carries on with as we move forward.
Yeah, maybe they were kind of presenting each other as kind of going to the dark side to gain an advantage because their forces are so strong together, or their baby face side, quote unquote, are so like magnetic that perhaps maybe they need to go away from that a little bit to kind of gain the advantage, and they're willing to make sure that they're victorious, even though and presenting that the Warriors and the Hulkamaniacs have their back regardless, that those Warriors and those Hulkamaniacs will be okay with it.
That I think that's the key there, that Warrior and Hogan both know their fans are behind them no matter what. So even with Warrior saying, I'm taking you to the darkness, he's presenting the concept, all my Warriors are there with me. So it's not that I go there on my own, it's we're already there. At the start of this feud, I kind of rallied you guys behind me, and both of us are so magnetic as good guys that we might need to veer off a little bit to kind of make it a little muddy or slimy and just stay with us because at our heart we're good guys. So maybe that's kind of how we take away from it. But it's funny that you said this before, that the main event would happen before the night before that they would announce the title Ultimate Challenge. So touch on that real quick. What's your overall thought of the behind the back or the perceived behind the back and all that at the main event, and then mix in finally saying that we have title, and now we're going to be out of February and we're in the final month of the Ultimate Challenge? Yeah, I mean, look, this has been covered on a previous episode of ChroNoSo, and we don't really want it. We're not going to go into much depth, but the key feature of the main event is Ultimate Warrior is attacked by Earthquake, and Hogan rushes out to save him. And in the process, like Warrior is, as Warrior starts to mount his part of the comeback, he takes Hogan out almost from behind. He sort of clotheslines him from behind. Like it's clearly unintentional, but he clotheslines him from behind, and it has a massive, sort of moment of, Oh my goodness. Jesse likes to play it up that, oh, here it is, Warriors trying to get at Hogan, but it creates an extra part to the story that Hogan plays in on the next set of promos.
Yes, and now that we're in March, the Superstars starts with Jesse picking Hulkamania with his Hulkamania gear. And then they kind of have a review of what we just said about Warrior attacking Hogan from behind accidentally at the main event. So what do you think of Jesse choosing Hulk first?
Honestly, with the history of Jesse's hatred of Hogan on commentary, and we all know that there is behind the scenes issues as well, I found it very interesting that he would be willing to go down that path of publicly siding with one over the other. Now, we know he hates Warrior as well. He hated them both quite equally. So it was an interesting dynamic that Jesse was showing visual support in a way of, I'm picking them to win, very un-Jesse like, but at the same time, I think it also played into just how important, how big this story is, that even Jesse the Body was willing to put it out there that he thinks one guy is going to beat the other one. Like, he could see it happening. And no matter everything he said about these guys in the past, he was willing to put it out there and even wear the stuff of Hogan, which you just wouldn't predict.
He did look a little weird with the Hulk gear on, right?
He did.
He looked extremely uncomfortable. But the next week on the March 10th edition of Superstars, Jesse would appear in the Ultimate Warrior jacket in the Intercontinental Championship, saying that he has the right to change his mind. And McMahon, he's now choosing the Ultimate Warrior to win at WrestleMania 6. And then it's unbelievable. He just in Jesse slimy way, right? He's just so good. And then later that episode, they would have Ronna Barrett, who spoke about how Ventura could not pick a winner. Who the hell is that?
Oh, I don't know. Look, I live in Australia. I'd never heard of her before WrestleMania 6. So, it beats me. But
probably some USA tie-in the channel, right? You got to think like Up All Night with Rhonda Shear, something like that, right?
But this is where like both of the guys, Hogan really starts talking about how he's gone back to basics. He's gone back to Venice Beach and gone back to where he came from to get ready and to prepare. And WrestleMania is going to be the most important day for the rest of our lives. And, I've got to prove, what does he say? I've got to prove to me. Yeah, so you've got to be, basically, he says, you've got to prove it to me by beating me, which is basically a take on, to be the man, you've got to beat the man. So Hogan sort of puts that out there, and Warrior is, again, he's coming in with, he actually says, you want to talk about, here we go, talking about things that come up in the future. Warrior says, I'm not, he says, everyone's basically saying I'm going to be the chosen one. He goes, I'm not the chosen one, I'm the only one. So we've got some play there on some things that come up. I just love the chosen one concept, which again, these concepts get refreshed through the years, Jeff Jarrett, Drew McIntyre, you name it, they've all reclaimed these lines.
Yeah. And again, we're still getting flip-flop from Jesse, but this time he has a bandana and the WWE Championship and a Hulkamania shirt, and he's kind of dipping deeper and does a Hulkamania impression, and then Vince is like, sorry, Hulk, about that impression.
It is brilliant. If you are watching or listening to this and you have never seen it, look for it, find it. It is a really good, it is a fantastic impression, down to the tearing of the shirt and the posing. It is just, all he needed was he'd shaved his mustache off by this point. I mean, imagine if he still had his Jesse mustache, it would have just been added to it. So it was great.
Well, I think Jesse's a little bit like getting back at Hulk since he ripped off me, right? So now it's just like ripping himself off, right, in his own mind. And then again on 3/24, Jesse is with the Intercontinental Championship Warrior t-shirt and face paint, and says that he's changing his mind again and picking the Warrior at WrestleMania 6.
I think he would have probably been throwing up putting that face paint on. I can't believe.
His
I
Hogan
don't
was
know
better
what
than his Warrior, but it was still good stuff.
Vince absolutely, but Vince must have been paying him well to do that. And but yeah, Jesse just continually again showing how big this match is. Jesse keeps flip flopping around. I think Warrior's going to win. I think Hogan's going to win. It's very un-Jesse like, and I think that really helps emphasize just how big a match this was.
And then we're here at the final week, 331, the day before WrestleMania 6, and Jesse shows up in a Hulkamania bandana in the Ultimate Warrior face paint saying, whoever wins, he wins.
and it's there's an interesting flip with the last couple of weeks of promos, because from the beginning of the journey, every week Hogan would get the first promo and Warrior would get the second. And I found that really interesting, because that was just so un-Vince like. Like, it was always Hogan got the last word all the time. But just in the last 2 weeks of the build, it flipped back. And Warrior gets the first promo, Hogan gets the second. But we're really at this point, we're at this point of Warrior going, I know I'm the chosen one. Hogan's going to know I'm the chosen one. I'm going to look at the challenge. I'm going to overcome it. I'm going to drag you into the darkness, and I'm going to prevail. And Hogan is coming back with he's more confident now. I've gone back to my roots. I've trained. I've listened to the Hulkamaniacs. They believe in me. I'm going to, I'm in the light. I'm the one who's going to bring you to the light, and all of you and your warriors are going to join me, and will all be together after this. He sort of brings that full circle that we're going to be together, and the Warriors will unite with the Hulkamaniacs. And Warrior never gave that perspective. He was sort of, Hogan saying, you're going to jump on my back, I'm going to carry you and the Warriors, and we're all going to be there together. Whereas Warriors very much, this is my time. And again, I go back to this. It's an interesting dichotomy, because Warriors promos have a slight heelish quality to them that it's very subtle. It's not, like we said earlier, it's always about my Warriors are with me, but yet he's talking about the darkness, talking about the confidence. It's not the typical babyface promo. And I wonder if it was done in a way of, if there's anyone on the fence, then they'll side with Hogan. If you're on the fence, you're going to side with Hogan after hearing this. I wonder if that was the mindset in the presentation. So that they didn't have silence, that they didn't want sort of apathy with the responses. They wanted cheers everywhere, but almost Hogan's still the ultimate baby face of our promotion. And it's just interesting going into this final, build to this main event, that I'm surprised that they allow Warrior to touch it like that. It seemed different and off, and not what you'd expect. And it's only when I watched all of these promos back to back that I really picked it up. I don't think you'd really notice it a great deal if you were watching a week apart with all the other, stuff happening.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I feel that the Warrior is, like, from a sports-like aspect, probably the biggest favorite heading into a WrestleMania versus Hulk, probably since Andre, of course, right? But even though you would think that Hulk would probably be the quote-unquote favorite, Hogan has never been beaten since debuting in 84 or so on and so forth. But Andre has never been, whatever, right? But this is definitely the biggest threat for Hogan since then. So yeah, they did a good job of building that, because last year, like we talked about earlier in this video, it was kind of a low-key blood feud, right? Where it was Liz and it was personal and all that. Now it's just like, well, I have my fans, you have your fans. We are these Goliath, this myth-like characters that are going to collide and just see what we got. And then we're going to see what we got. It's kind of the ultimate challenge. It's to build up to what it was. It's these two forces going at each other with no real substance of personal history between the two characters. Do you feel that that aspect hurt this feud, or they did with the whole mythical babyface A, mythical babyface B equals seeing who's the better man that might is more makes up from the interesting thing because it doesn't hurt the quality of the match. It's a fantastic match and the
I,
heat's
I
there and everything and so on and so forth. But do you think
mm,
that that perhaps maybe hurt Warrior as the year went on, where the kind of crowd dissipated away from him?
I think the long-term storytelling, yeah, I think I agree with that. That I think this hurt Warrior in the longer term. That I think if they'd flipped the story and it was Warrior questioning, can I do this? And looking like he's the underdog prevailing and promising Warrior being the one to promise, I'm going to unite the Hulkamaniacs and the Warriors together instead of Hogan saying those things. I think that might have helped him moving down the track. I think that's, yeah, I think that impact on the longer term storytelling is where it's evident. I think in the moment it didn't, and even they did a great job with the main event and then the superstars match between Bravo and Hogan, where Earthquake attacks Hogan and then Warrior comes out and saves him, and they've done this great presentation of these two guys respect each other. They're on par with each other. They're equals. And so when this match happens, I don't think it impacted the quality of the match or the story of the match. The story of the match was these were the top two guys. No one was on their level. That helped. That night was great. And I think therein lies the other issue for Warrior moving forward. He's just been spent 3 months being presented as he's on a level with Hogan. And we've just spent 4 years learning that no one is equal to Hogan. So for Warrior to suddenly be equal with Hogan and having overcome Hogan, who else is there for him? What else is there for him? Like everyone else in the company has already been beaten, except for one guy, and then that guy faces Hogan instead of Warrior anyway. But that's a whole nother story for a future ChroNoSo. But I think, yeah, Hogan's Warrior's long-term storytelling is hurt by, I think, this equal footing presentation, and the lack of the personal element means that after the match, there's nothing for the non-Warrior fans to get behind.
Yeah, the Hulkamania fans are sad, and they were just like, "Well, there was no investment for you to get me with you, Warrior.
Mm,
It was like you were s super confident against our guy, and then you kinda beat our guy, so we're, like, defeated, and we can't
mm,
get over it to get over it with you." Where Hogan was just like, "All right, well, if you can't beat me, join me." And Warrior's
yeah.
like, "Well, I'm gonna beat you anyways, so I don't care if you're with me, Hulkamaniacs. You know, I have my warriors
Mm,
with me, and my warriors are stronger than all of you guys." So it was kind of like
mm,
he pitted himself away from potentially half the crowd, which was Eddie Baby,
yeah.
because this is the first time that we're splitting the crowd at the top
Mm,
of the card at a WrestleMania. So
yeah.
interesting.
I was going to say
Yeah.
the other thing I found interesting about this build is Jack Tunney announces it to be title for title. And the very first week, you get the whole, well, this is such a big deal. And then after that, the IC title, no one talks about it. It's all about winning the world
Hogan.
time, being the world champion, being the top of the game. It
Does Hogan
really,
even mention it once?
but I mean, I just felt that premise of it's going to be title for title just made. I know why they did it initially. In the first couple of weeks, it was really good. Whose title's this match going to be for? Who is going to be the defending? Like that made a good intrigue to the initial signing of the match. But the fact that once the match was signed, the IC title was never talked about again, I think diminishes the title versus title aspect and made it irrelevant and almost made it that we all knew. Unfortunately, anyone who can tell the story, read the story at all, knew where it was going. There was no doubt that it was going to be Warrior coming out on top.
Yeah. Yeah. What can you do, right? Now, do you think that the Warrior coming out at WrestleMania 6 with just the Warrior face on his chest and like a little Warrior on his cheek is a way to kind of humanize him leading out of WrestleMania 6? And you think that kind of hurts him?
Yeah, I think it again. I think the presentation hurts him because Warrior was the face paint. Warrior was it was the persona, the image, and when you change it, when you change it in a moment, with no rhyme or reason, then it makes no sense, for it to have happened, and it changes your perception of him. We don't look at Warrior as the guy with the face paint. Sorry, the guy. We don't look at Warrior as one of the guys. He's the guy with the painted face, the muscles, the tassels. That's his the energy. That's his presentation. And you take one little aspect away, it pulls away a little bit something from him, and takes away part of that superhero aspect of him. And I know they were trying to humanize him, but he got over because he was superhuman. Same way Hogan. It'd be like sending Hogan out at WrestleMania 6 in the white trunks and the white boots, or the light blue trunks and the light boots. It's just that's not the image that's been presented of Hogan ever. Why would he do that? This doesn't make sense.
All right, Dave. Well, we're at the end of this journey, the Ultimate Challenge. I feel that they did a fairly good job of getting the idea of two mythical forces, making you pick a side and presenting it as a baby first match instead of this personal hate grudge feud. And I feel that it's a risk, right? But I feel that they accomplished that risk. And this feels bigger after going through it with you and kind of checking everything out leading into it. So out of 10, I'm like at a 9 for this, right? I'm super jazzed up to relive this.
Absolutely. I think a 9 is good. The only thing that would have made it a 10 is if you had that moment where there'd been that person element, there'd been a blow, and they'd come to, if when Warrior clotheslined Hogan got up and they started battering into each other, like that might have elevated it to that 10. But without that person element, absolutely 9 out of 10.
Yeah, and the next time you see us here in ChroNoSo, we'll be with WrestleMania 6.
Absolutely, the Ultimate Challenge.
I'm sure this match will probably make the cut for YouTube. We'll see about that one. But Dave, it was great for you to have me, and thank you for jumping on and giving us a recap of this journey to the Ultimate Challenge at WrestleMania 6.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right, guys. See you on the next one.